Hello, everyone, and welcome to you all to our weekly free webinar. And thank you for joining. And today it's me instead of Hair Color is going to share the following 1 hour with you. So we are going to talk about the handle time in contact centers. And so during the webinar, because I actually couldn't really see the chats, but my colleague will propose any of the questions you wrote down to me. And if it was not addressed during the webinar, we will also discuss them in the end. So first, I think I will take just 1 minute to introduce myself, and then you will understand who you are talking with in the following 1 hour. My name is Siqiao Li, and I started working for CCmath since 2 years ago, and I mainly focus on developing algorithms and use the knowledge I have in mathematical knowledge to try to solve the practical challenges we got from contact center WFM decisions. So if you look at the website we have, then you will find tools I was developing, and also I'm still developing the CC scheduling engine and the OmniSim tool. So that's pretty much about me, the relationship with CCmath. So today we want to talk about handle time. And that's a really a very important thing in contact center, of course. And it is in general the time agents take to offer the service. So during this handle time, agents are going to handle your questions and requests. And they can be nowadays, can be calls, emails, chats, and with different skills and service types. And the customers, of course, during this handle time, they want to get their problem solved and they want to obtain the information they need. So that's the handle time. And then why we want to spend this time to understand this average handling time, that because you will find everywhere in your decisions about WFM, because it's one of the key components. And no matter you do what kind of calculation, like the net workload calculation or the gross workload calculation, and then you will find this average handling time there you need to enter. And also, if you want to do performance evaluation of your staffing, for example, you use Erlang C or Erlang X, and then you also will see the input part. You need to enter this magic number there. So since we have this input parameter needed, and then today we want to discuss on how you can get this value and then how to make this as a good input, because as I think we also probably mentioned it in the first webinar, like if you have call volumes, like your forecast is not good, then you probably also result in understaffing and overstaffing. And then actually it also happens for this average handling time. So if you, when you do this calculation and then you give a bad guess of this average handling time, then it could also, let's see this small example. I just put 0.1 minute more on the average handling time, and then it will already result in 4 agents more on the staffing. So if you have a bad guess, it will also have a bad, there's a consequence. So that's also a very important reason we will look into how we develop this parameter better. So before we go to how to calculate the average handling time or predict it, let's first start with what this handling time composed of. So if we can have a good definition on this, I would say we can say the handling time of a certain customer request. So if you receive a request, and then the handling time should be considered as the time that an agent is dedicated to this call or chat. So in this case, I will break down inbound call and to see how it go across the each step. So if you have an inbound call, then first you probably will meet the AVR time. So in this time, so as when you call a contact center, you probably always meet this. They will say, hello, welcome to call. And this part is pre-recorded. And then they will route you by choosing different numbers most of the time. And then they will route you to the correct or the right queue or the service type. And then if you are lucky, you probably get directly connected to an agent. But otherwise, if all agents are busy, which is most of the time, and then you need to wait for an available agent, and that time is called queue time. And then if they find an agent can handle you, and then it will start to ring. But then this small time is the time we call ring time, is the time the call is waiting for pickup. And then the agent will pick it up after several seconds. And normally, to make sure they are picked up in time, it has a threshold on that. So when the agent start pick up the call and start to talk, and that is the melee call duration, which will have the interaction between the caller and the agent to talk about the issues the caller wants to solve. And then after the call is hung up, and then the agent usually need to take also a short time to write down or get some notes on what he or she just handled. So especially nowadays, the AI technology is implemented or applied to contact center more and more. And this wrap up time, the notes they write down, is actually very important to analyze, for example, the quality of the call and how what is the call is really about. So the wrap up time is quite necessary. And then this agent can be considered as complete a call process. So you will see the agent already dedicated to the call from the ring time and the talk and the hold time and the wrap up time. So you could add these three parts and then some of them are considered as a handling time of a call. And sometimes you will also find the ring time is not included because it's a little bit tricky. First of all, the customers or the caller can also abandon during this time. And also ring time is not directly related to the call content yet. So also they could be included in the waiting time as well. So it's also fine if you put only your talk and hold time and wrap up time together as handling time. But the wrap up time should be included. So if we just say gather all the handling times of each call in your call center and then plot a histogram on that, you will see some form or shape like this. So first you will find this here has a small bar, which is very short calls. And then most of the time they are due to like technical issues. And then the customer just hang up, even probably before the agents are really answering it. And then you also could find a lot of calls, not really a lot of them, but at least a certain amount of calls. They are in this long tail part. And then they are handled with a long handling time. So because of this heavy tail shape, you will find the most frequent handling time, which locates here, is actually not really the average handling time you calculated with these calls. So they have a gap in between. And because of this long tail here, the average handling time often is longer than your most frequent handling time. So for this case, you can see the most frequent one is less than 200 seconds, but the average handling time is actually 257.6. So if you plot also any skew in your call center, you will find similar shape. So you barely can really plot a beautiful normal distribution, like a symmetric one here, due to these issues. So, but I mean, this shape itself, if you have statistical background, you will realize this is a little bit like log normal distribution. But most of time, as I already explained in the first slides, and then most of time you only need average handling time, this value. So you don't need to really enter what shape you have in your call center. But please note, these short calls and also this long time calls, they will all affect the results of your average handling time, because the more long handling time calls you have, of course, you will have your average value more shifted to the right? So also, like if you have too many calls too short, like you have a lot of technical issues, and then you will also have affect the average handling time from this part. So on the other hand, if in your system you plot your handling time like this, and you find a lot of calls are located this area and the tail area, it also is a sign to say you have less control in your call center handling times. You should do some more work to control it or limit it more. Okay, so this is like the handling time distribution. The histogram shows the shape of the distribution. But if we look at this, so when we want to have the simple input value, so should we just simply taking the average of all the calls? So I don't think that's a good idea. And the very first reason is the average handling time is affected by the channel and the skill, right? So a simple example can be if you call a call center to just change your password, and the time you spend in the call definitely will be different from the time you are going to spend if you call a call center to repair your laptop or other issues. So let's say with different skills, it already gives a different shape of the handling time of that skill. So I will show this example. So this is like from the same call center I just showed before, but for a certain skill, the handling time histogram looks like this. And then the other skill, if you plot it, it looks differently. And also the average handling time you calculated for each skill can change a lot. But if you really don't separate them and then just simply averaging overall, then you will get this number. And then that means you will use this number to calculate for all of the skills, which will result in definitely understaffing or overstaffing. So we strongly suggest first you should separate per skill and calculate the average handling time for them. Okay, so that is the first reason, as we said, it's affected by the channel and the skill. But actually, the average handling time per skill itself also varies. So it's not going to be constant during all days. But this figure we show here is we consider skill 1, as I just displayed there, the average handling time per day. And you will find it also varies along days, and it can be more or less like 20% difference varies, sorry. And then the reason of why the average handling time per queue also vary can be explained in two aspects. First is even they belong to the same skill, and then they could have just different contents. And then sometimes you can call it's like the call mix are different in different time of the day and the day of the week. So it has its own seasonality or even trend. So for example, you could find just difficult calls often happen in the morning or on Monday. So it has the call, let's say the call content will affect your average handling time. And on the other hand, the agent mix will also play a big role. So every day you could have a different pool of agents scheduled on that day. So you may call them crew, like the crew of the agents. And then based on different scheduling pattern you have, like scheduling policy, and then you could result in really different crews on different days. So you will observe in some call centers, like the Saturday, they often just schedule the newly hired agents, then who tend to handle calls in a longer handling time. Then you would find on Saturday, average handling time is often higher than, for example, a work day like Monday, right? So these two aspects will all affect your average handling time you obtained. So let's say you observe an average handling time per day, and this is already the value affected by both of these effects. So that also explains why we really need to take more efforts on this to forecast or predict your average handling time, considering all these factors. And for this agent mix part, I want to explain a little bit more. So because the historical data you have in your call center, you can really study the average handling time in this individual agent level, because you, in a call record, you could understand, or you could get information on which agent is really handling it. So by doing that, you could plot, for example, this figure, each agent in your pool, how he handles calls. So this is like the average handling time we aggregated every 4 weeks, and then to show what this agent is handling for the calls, of course, within the same skill, and then per 4 weeks. So this shows different agents, they have a different, let's say, different converge. They converge to different levels of experience, and then they just have different average handling time. Like this green one here, and this agent seems to handle this type of calls in a really short time always. So because of the difference in the experience levels, and every day you also can schedule different agents to that day, it will eventually result in different days you will obtain different average handling time. So this comes to the terminology we sometimes use, like the agent proficiency, because we would like a way to explain or to show how experienced this agent is, especially compared to other agents. So this is the way we show it. So we say we could first calculate the overall average handling time, and then we use this to approximate the average handling time of this standard agent. And then compared to this standard agent, we would like to know for each agent in your pool, in your group, what is this agent's individual average handling time. And then the ratio you obtain from this formula could help you to understand, okay, then this agent itself, this individual agent, how many this standard agents, right? He or she represents. So then compared to this overall average handling time and the less or the shorter individual average handling time you will have a higher ratio. And then it means this agent handle calls in a shorter time. And then you can also sometimes to say they are more productive. So if you have one day and then the agents you scheduled on that day, you aggregated them together, you could derive a group proficiency of that day. So I think it will be better to explain this in a small example. So here in this Excel, I have a data on a lot of calls happened in the last several months, I think several weeks. And in total, it has among 40,000 calls. And then each call, I, of course, have the information on which agent handles it, and then the handling time of this call. Okay, so as I mentioned in the slide, I can first calculate the overall average handling time of all the calls. So here I use average functions to calculate the average of them. And then this value will help us to approximate the average handling time of the standard agent. Okay, so let's assume for a day you schedule 6 agents there, and then they are agent 4 with the ID 4 and 18 and then 84 like this. And then for each of the agents, if we look into the historical data, how they handle calls, we could get the average handling time of this agent specifically. And then we can list it here, which is the weighted one. So this is the handling time of the calls, the total handling time of all calls, and this is the number of calls. And then we can get the average handling time of each agent. So the proficiency then can be calculated by use the overall average handling time, and as we present here, and then divided by the average handling time of this call, this agent, sorry. And so the smaller this proficiency number is, it means the longer time, because then this value need to larger than this overall average handling time to get a number smaller than 1. So the smaller this number is, the longer handling time, the longer average handling time this agent will have. So in that way, if you sum them up, for example, this agent is 0.9 and the other is 0.8. So you sum of them can give you the idea or the concept, like the day, although you schedule 6 agents, and then for the day, actually it's stand for you scheduled 5.67 standard agents for that day. So if you have a number larger than the number of agents you schedule there, that means for that day, the agents you schedule, they are more or less faster than your standard agents. Okay, so you could also aggregate your agent proficiency to group proficiency. So as we mentioned, for this day, we have agent for 18 and until 84. And then we can first calculate the weighted average handling time for these 6 agents. And then you get this number, which is calculated by first sum all these handling time of this agent and the second agent, and then divided by the calls they have. So this weighted average handling time of these 6 agents is this value. And then you can, again, as the same logic here, we can use the overall average handling time, which is the standard agent handling time, to divide it by this value, which gives you the scheduled group proficiency of that day. So I think it's clear. It's quite clear or natural to understand if for a certain day you have like all the agents there, then you will have the same value as you get overall average handling time here. So we could say the standardized group proficiency will always equal to 1. But for a certain day, you always just schedule a part or a group of this big pool. So every day you could have a different scheduled group proficiency. And this also explains why the average handling time also varies every day. So all this explanation is for to explain the agent mix part, how it affects your average handling time. But there is actually one more difficulty layer on this, is the average handling time of this individual agent is also not constant. So if you remember, like the previous slide here, we actually selected the agents already worked for quite a certain months and quite a certain weeks. So they kind of converge to their experience level, but they're already different. But even the new agent, so if you look at the new agents, it's even have a curve there. So there are also studies show, like not only for the new agents, like the agents, they already become convert to a level, but they probably take a long break, like 4 months break, or they probably change to another skill and go back. And then you will see these kind of curves again, because this is agent, they forget, they pick up the skill they have before. So it's also important to analyze this learning curve, because this shows for a specific skill and how these agents are learning it. Okay, so we call this change of the average handling time here a learning curve. So you can imagine if now you calculate the proficiency of a bunch of newly hired agents, and then the proficiency could be less, right? Because we said the higher the proficiency number is, the shorter the average handling time is. So for this case, if you have newly hired agents, then they present or represent a less number of the standard agents you have, right? So let's say, especially important when you have newly hired agents, you should really understand or try to dig out what is the learning curve in your contact centers. But we should also remember the proficiency of an agent just can change also. So it's also just nice to track how they are handling calls, right? And then it will give you a proficiency curve. So other than the agent side, so in the beginning we said, yeah, the skill affects the average handling time, and also the agent mix and the call mix, right? So even you consider, let's say you filter out all these parameters, and you will find there are also other factors will affect the average handling time. And these are the factors. There are studies to show this, but it's really the factors very difficult to capture. And but you could take these factors also into your mind, and then when you analyze each agent, how they handle calls, these factors will help you to explain the plots or explain the data you derive. Right. So the first factor will be could be the agents can suffer from shift fatigue, because they are human beings and they start to work in a quite active mood most of the time. And then because it's quite long, sometimes it can be 8 hours, and then you will find their productivity gets lower. Right. So they tend to handle calls let's say longer. But there also a fun thing is sometimes you also could find the average handling time of the calls actually get shorter when they start to work longer. But that is based on because of the reason, like they want to really handle the calls quick and then to go to the next call, and they have less patience than before. So in that case, you should also, so that will lead to another conclusion I will show later. Like you shouldn't only use average handling time as your criteria, but probably the call quality is already getting down, and then even they handle a call in a short time, but probably they are not really fully handled, and it will lead to the caller call back again to solve something they didn't solve completely. So, but these are indeed the factor you should consider will vary during the day. So if you find your handling time also change during the day, these are the factors you could search for one by one. Okay, so the second part is sometimes it's not considered a lot, is congestion level. So how busy your call center is. So sometimes if your call center is very busy, and then in the beginning, agents find the number of calls in the queue are higher, so they try to handle calls even in a shorter time because they want to get rid of the calls in the queue. But most of the time, if this situation stays, like it doesn't solve and it keep in this busy mood, then a lot of agents will not as fast as before anymore. They get tired of this situation, and then they start to handle even slower because there are a lot of calls waiting in the queue anyway. So these congestion level of your call center during the day will also affect how an agent handle a call. So in other words, if you have a constantly quite okay service level over the day, then you could also get less affected by this factor, and then you could have let's say the agents have the same mood or same behavior on handling calls. So this also a reason that say we should often have a nice service level, because it will also lead to a good consequences, and then will help you even more to keep this good service level. Okay, so these all factors, if we recall a little bit from beginning, the skill types and the agent mix, and also the call contents, and again here is the very specific agent behaviors. All these factors are not trying to, let's say, all combined to eventually show you just this one number, average handling time. So this gives us a very challenging task to predict the average handling time correct or reliable. So what do? We also prepared some takeaways to help you to bring you a little bit more on how to do this. So first is we really need to consider also wrap up time, because sometimes you find, okay, wrap up time is not long, it's just 20 seconds or less than 1 minute, but consider it. So take into consideration will really give you more reliable results. And there are also studies showing you have this wrap up, if you ignore this, it could affect let's say a wrong service level or performance evaluation. Okay, so first get your definition of handling time correct, and then you should start to separate your calls according to each queue, and then to make sure they are really handling more or less the same type of calls. Then they will have a similar handling time distribution, right? And then the second part is, of course, the call mix and the agent mix. So if you could have an integral forecasting approach to forecast or predict your average handling time, then you could really try to separate this call mix and agent mix effects. And then later, when you do capacity planning, and then you can according to what kind of agents you are going to hire. Do you have newly hired agents later, or do you just have the same agents as what you have now in the agent groups? Then you can add this agent mix effect back. So let's say if you could separate the effects here, then it can help you to give a reliable capacity or workforce management decisions for future. So in the end, I want to stress this part. So the whole talk is about average handling time, it seems like we really chase for a short average handling time. But indeed, because if they can handle a same call in a shorter time, and they can be more experienced, it will reduce the agents, the number of agents you need to staff, right? But on the other hand, as I already slightly explained earlier, is you shouldn't only chase for this. So if your average handling time, so if you really limit the average handling time too much, then the agents probably will handle the call too short, so they cannot really handle the call in a good quality. Then you will, if you use, I don't know if everyone is familiar with first call resolution, and then you will find this value gets really down. And then even the caller already called and got handled, and then they probably need to call again, which is often called reconnect in call centers. And we also want to avoid that. So we shouldn't really limit on this average handling time too much. But as I explained in the beginning, if you remember the histogram, then we should, when we plot it, if you find too heavy tail, like you have too many long time calls, you also you still should think of ways to control it. So this is like a trade of the balance you should let's say study with, and to thinking of a way to make sure it's not really too strict to get quality down, but also make sure you have a relative productive call center. Okay, so today when we talk about this handling time thing, we focus on mainly on the inbound calls, right? So we didn't consider the emails and chats yet, because the handle time of these two channels are slightly different from calls. They have their own behaviors on that. So I think in the future free webinars, we will address them definitely. And so today's takeaways and today's lots of conclusions we had is mainly for inbound calls. So I think that's for the contents I gave for today. And I don't know how long time we left. We are we are much shorter than we expected, but then we can discuss about some details more. And do we have some questions?
Yeah, I have a question from Aryan and from DJ.
Yeah. So I probably better just go outside to see the messages. Yeah. Allow me to go back to the chats. Okay. So let's start with
a question from Aryan at 4:30.
At 4:30. So what would be the best approach to work with proficiency of agents regarding average handling time? To be more specific, how do you forecast an average handling time for Monday morning when you still don't know who would be scheduled? Yes. So indeed, if you have your average handling time, if you just use your historical data to predict a future Monday morning, then it probably already gave you results with longer average handling time, because it's already affected by the agent mix you had before, right? So that's exactly what I mentioned in the end. A more integral method is suggested. So to really consider each component, like agent mix and call mix, when you already apply your forecasting method or prediction method, and then you will get the fit for each component. And then you could use the component of the call mix part. You continue this for the future Monday, but for the agent part, you could first filter it. And then for the next Monday, if you more or less are doing the same as what we are doing now, then you could just have the same average handling time, same agent mix effect. But if you have additional information on next Monday, then you could have a better agent mix fit on next Monday. So a good word to conclude this is you can decomponentize the components. Decompose. Yeah, that's the word. So you decompose your every components and then try to fit separately. So there are some like linear regression based methods, a lot of prediction approaches can support that. But that's indeed a really good question. So Rayan, I don't know if you hear my answer or not, but I hope it explains a little bit. So shall we move to the next one?
Yep, 437.
437. So can you match proficiency with shift bidding allocation to match desired and the budgeted average handling time? Yes, I think, the answer is positive. I think the shift bidding allocation is designed for, let's say, the agent to consider which day they are going to schedule, right? So the proficiency definitely should be included in that part, because then you knew if you allow this agent to work on a certain period, then what really represents for. So as we explained, like the standard agents, right? So at least you can get the information about if you allow that, then how many standard agents you are really scheduling on that day. So it will give you more reliable performance evaluation, I think. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. And thank you, Ryan. I hope I pronounce your name right. And then you gave me another tip. So make sure you have a reliable database for analyzing your average handling time. Definitely sure. Yeah. I mean, data sample is everything. I would say first you need to have a clean one. If you have too many break data and the data is missing, and I will share a small example I had. So last year I was dealing with a call data set from a company. I won't say which company, and then they gave me the data set, like each call there is a agent ID and who handles it. But in the end, it turns out the agent ID is not always only specific or dedicated to the same agent. So that means the data set shows agent ID 4 is handling this call, but probably 3 months later, it already means another person is handling it. So that is definitely not a good data set to understand your learning curve or agent proficiency, because it doesn't show the right agent anymore. And then the whole pattern you learned or the whole conclusions you draw doesn't make sense anymore. So to keep your data set clean and recording everything right is very essential. Essential. Okay. So do we have the next question? There are some persons say very clever. Thank you so much. And I hope it brings some idea. And no questions.
He has a question also, Lucas.
Oh, okay. Confess of the average handling time. And do you think analyzing skewness could be a good idea to determine if it makes sense, the effort to reconvert all the templates and the processes? I'm not sure I fully understand what you mean, but it seems like you want to analyze on your handling time distribution.
Can you maybe explain by voice?
Yeah.
You switch on the slide.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Hello.
Lucas.
So yeah, great presentation. Thank you. Very, very clever. So as I say, I normally use the average handling time. So I realized after seeing the presentation that might be something not very, very smart. So, but for that, I might need to reconvert all the templates and processes that we already have as we work on average handling time. So my question was to find a way to determine if it makes sense to do the effort of changing all the processes if the actual distribution of the handling time is not so skewed as we think.
Yeah, so I think I will explain this in two aspects. So first, if you are not fully sure, do you need to like reanalyze everything or not, then I think the best thing is first you should always plot it first. So you just choose, if you have too many skills, you randomly choose some of them, and then you plot them, and then you first see your distribution. So as I mentioned in the beginning, if your distribution looks more or less that shape, it's always like that, but you don't have too many calls in the heavy tail, and you don't have too many calls in the short part, then it's more or less okay. But if you find a lot in these two areas, they definitely affect your average handling time you always believe there. So you first could try to improve the data or improve your call center system to have less in the two sides. That's the first thing. And if you ask, do we have a good standard to say when you change to when you analyze or not, I would say you could fit this histogram you have to a log normal distribution. So if it's too far away from log normal distribution, it also is a sign you should control it more. And yeah, I think that's the thing you could look first before you make big decisions on changing everything. And
Thank you.
Do you think it explains a little bit or not? I mean, because I still explain all these with my face there, and I hope you have a smile after my talk.
Yeah. It was very clear. I'll sneak peek the log normal then. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. All exponential actually, but if you do simulation or we found you fit to exponential or log normal, it doesn't really change a lot as long as the average handling time is not really different. Yeah.
Thank you.
And do we have any other questions? Because I think I need to talk until 1 hour. So if there's no more questions, please allow me just speak a little bit about my about next week webinar. So next week, I think all company we are everyone is making sure this webinar happens every Friday, because I mean it's a difficult time for all of us, but at least I hope we can have this 1 hour and enjoy this 1 hour share experience online. And so we will make sure we make it, but we have not determined on who is going to speak and what subject is, but we of course want to hear from you, like what do you really want to learn or not to learn or discuss more on which topic, and we will definitely take that into consideration. And also, again, this is going to be online, and I hope I'm not too bad on the camera. And then if you find any questions you think more, and then you want to give us suggestions, it's always more than welcome. And in the end, so I want to show a little bit. So this is my, because I'm quite proud of my work. So I would want to say, if you look for us, Google us, you will find we are really working on really good softwares. And then sometimes you didn't think about it, but if you look at it, probably you already find it's interesting and you want to try. It's always nice to have a free demo on that, from CC scheduling, forecast, and all plugins. We try to help practitioners from really different angles, and we have simple products, we have complicated ones like Omnisim, and then just any question, you just feel free to contact us. And also recently we are really working to revise our learning platform. And then a lot of knowledges, a lot of information you get from this webinar, you could also find in that website. And I hope it can be your friends in that there. Okay, so that's it. And then see you all next week, and then have a nice weekend after this Friday 5 o'clock. Bye.